7 days after the disappearance, she was found on a beach in Southern California. Before that, she went missing in a Canadian forest during a solo hike. The search team covered dozens of square kilometers. They found the tent, the backpack, traces by the campfire. Her, no. No system recorded a border crossing. No camera showed her at the airport. No vehicle traveled the highways with her involvement. When she was discovered in California, she was alive, without signs of violence, without dehydration, without weight loss. Her medical indicators did not correspond to 7 days of survival in the wilderness. She does not remember how she got there. A mark appeared on her wrist. It was not there before the hike. It cannot be removed. And this is not the only case. There are things that do not fit into any explanatory model. I am not talking about urban legends or internet myths. I am talking about a case with names, dates, medical documents, and police reports on both sides of the border. And what happened next makes this story far more disturbing than a simple disappearance. First, it is necessary to understand one thing: who Mara Lindstrom was before she disappeared. Because if you think this is about an inexperienced person who got lost in the forest, you are mistaken, fundamentally. And this is exactly what makes the whole story so inexplicable. Mara grew up in the province of Alberta. Her father worked as a forester, not in an office, not at a computer, but in a real forest with an axe, a compass, and a map. He took her with him from the age of 8. She learned to read tracks, understand terrain, determine the weather by the smell of the air, long before she learned to drive a car. By the age of 23, she had more than 100 routes behind her, including solo crossings through mountainous terrain in conditions where most people would not even leave the house. She did not belong to the category of people who get lost. In the summer of 2019, she planned a 2-week autonomous route in the area of Nahanni National Park in the Northwest Territories of Canada. For those who do not know, this is not the type of place where tourists go with a backpack from a sporting goods store. Nahanni is true wilderness, a river with rapids, cliffs, endless taiga. Minimal infrastructure, rare communication, practically no oversight. There are no trails here in the usual sense. There is only nature, which is not particularly interested in your survival. And this place has a history. A dark history, which I will talk about a little later, because it is important. Very important. The route was registered according to all the rules. With the Park Service, a movement plan, planned campsites, check-in points via satellite messenger. The equipment was selected properly. No violations, no red flags. But there was something else. A few days before departure, those who knew Mara noticed something unusual about her. Not fear. She had gone hiking hundreds of times and was not afraid. Not doubt in her abilities. Rather, an inner tension that she herself could not explain. She spoke about a strange feeling of being watched, that someone or something was looking at her, without reason. In the apartment, on the street, in the store, everywhere, constantly. This feeling appeared out of nowhere and did not go away for several days in a row. No one attached importance to it. Fatigue before a major route, pre-hike tension. All of this seemed like a reasonable explanation. After all, who among us has not felt something similar before an important event? On July 14th, 2019, Mara set out on the route. The first scheduled satellite signal was supposed to arrive in 3 days, on July 17th. It did not arrive. At first, there was no alarm. In the Nahanni area, communication is unstable by its very nature. This is known to everyone who works with this region. Delays happen. The signal disappears. The Park Service waited a day, then another day. On the 18th, silence. On the 19th, silence. On July 20th, a search operation was announced. The team set out along the declared route. The The weather did not interfere. The terrain matched the planned campsites. Professional searchers, dog handlers, helicopters. The camp was found on the second day of the search, July 21st. And this is where what I warned about at the very beginning begins. At first glance, nothing unusual. The tent is set up properly. The sleeping bag is laid out. The backpack is at the entrance, fully packed. On the portable burner stood a mug, with unfinished tea that had long gone cold. An open book lay nearby. Page 84. No bookmark. Everything looked as if the person had stood up for a second and would be back any moment. She did not return. But that is not the worst part. The worst part was inside the tent. The trekking boots stood neatly by the sleeping place, both of them. Untouched. Let that fact settle into your mind for a second. Mara left the camp barefoot, in the Canadian taiga. At night, when the temperature drops to 5 degrees above zero, where the soil is soft, marshy, capable of capturing the slightest trace, and the search team did not find a single trace around the camp. No boot prints, no barefoot footprints, no traces at all leading away from the camp in any direction. There were no signs of a struggle. There were no drag marks. There were no animal tracks that would indicate a predator attack. The equipment was untouched. The food supplies were in place. The backpack was closed. One of the participants in the search operation, a man with 15 years of experience, would later say that in his entire career, he had never seen anything like it. A person physically cannot leave a tent without leaving traces, especially barefoot, especially in this soil. This contradicts elementary physics. The search continued for 6 days. 40 people, helicopters, canine units, expansion of the perimeter every day, no body, no signs of departure, not a single lead. On the 7th day of the search, the situation changed. Just not in Canada. On July 27, 2019, at about 6 in the morning local time, on the beach of Santa Monica in California, a fisherman named Daniel Herrera saw a girl sitting by the waterline. She was sitting facing the ocean, motionless, barefoot, in light trekking pants and a fleece jacket. He approached. She responded to his address, gave her name, recognized the ocean, stated, and this was the first moment when it became clear that something was seriously wrong, that she had been in Canada. An ambulance was called immediately. The distance from the Nahanni National Park area to the beach of Santa Monica is almost 3,000 kilometers, 7 days. 3,000 kilometers. Barefoot. Without money, without documents, without a single record in the border control system. At the hospital, a full examination was conducted, and here, medicine encountered something for which it had not a single coherent explanation. On the body, no injuries, none at all. Not a scratch, not a bruise. No signs of violence or restraint. No insect bites. And this is an important detail because in the Nahanni area in summer, mosquitoes literally do not let you breathe. Any person who spent even a day there without protection would be covered in bites from head to toe. No damage to the feet, no calluses, no abrasions, no inflammation. A person who walked barefoot for 7 days through the Canadian taiga should have had feet in a monstrous condition. Her feet looked as if she had spent that entire week at home in slippers. And the most inexplicable from a physiological point of view, body weight. She did not lose a single gram. A person without food for 7 days loses weight. This is not an opinion, not an assumption. This is biology. This is a medical fact that is not debated. Mara weighed exactly as much as she weighed when she set out on the route. The doctors rechecked several times. Blood tests, normal in all indicators. No narcotic substances, no sedatives, no toxins. Mara Lindstrom's physiology did not confirm a 7-day stay in extreme conditions. It confirmed that the person had spent this time in comfort and safety. But there was one more fact, the one that turns all the other data into insignificant background. On the inner side of her left wrist, there was a pattern. Geometric, clear, precise. Concentric circles with radial lines, like a spiderweb diagram, like a target, like something in between. The pattern was not located on the surface of the skin. It was deeper, in the tissues beneath the skin. Dermatologists described it as a structure that resembles a tattoo, but located where tattoos do not exist. It did not cause inflammation. It was not rejected by the body. It simply was. As if it had always been there. But it had not always been there. This was verified by photographs taken before the hike. The mark appeared during the 7 days that Mara does not remember. And this is only the beginning. When doctors and investigators began working with Mara's memory, the following became clear. The last clear memory, the evening of July 16th. She set up camp, cooked dinner, read a book. Everything standard. But she remembered one thing with unusual clarity. The silence. She described it this way. The forest in that area is never truly quiet. There is always something. Birds, insects, wind in the treetops, the crack of branches, the sound of the river somewhere in the distance, background life that never stops. That evening, nothing. Absolute zero. As if someone had turned off the sound of the entire world at once. Mara noticed it. She felt uneasy. But the fatigue after a long day's hike took over, and she decided to go to sleep. After that, a break. She remembers that she got up. Why, she does not know. No external reason. No sound that could have woken her. Just a feeling of the need to get up and go outside. As if it were completely logical and correct, just as it is logical to turn off the light before sleep. Not anxiety, not fear, not panic. Simply, it was necessary to go out. She went out. And that is all. The next memory, the beach, wet sand under her feet, salty air, the sound of the ocean, and a feeling. She described it this way several times in different interviews, always in the same words, as if she had been put on pause, and then someone pressed play. Between these 2 points in her memory, there is nothing. Not fog, not fragments, not vague images, precisely nothing. An empty space where 7 days of life should be. The version of a dissociative episode was considered. Dissociative fugue is a real medical phenomenon in which a person, under the influence of stress, moves without awareness of what is happening and subsequently remembers nothing. Such cases are documented, but a dissociative episode does not explain 3,000 kilometers without transport transactions, without crossing the border, without a single witness along the way, without surveillance cameras, without anything at all that would confirm physical movement. A dissociative episode does not explain the absence of weight loss. A dissociative episode does not explain the mark under the skin on the wrist. And a dissociative episode does not explain what began several weeks later. The dreams began in August. At first rarely, once every few days, then more often, then every night, then several times a night. Always the same place. Mara described it this way, an enclosed space with no visible walls. Rather, boundaries of darkness. The surface under her feet is hard, smooth, warm, like heated stone, lighting without a source, an even cold, slightly bluish light that simply exists, and it is unclear where it comes from. In this place, she is not alone. She never sees who else is there, never distinguishes forms, but she knows, with absolute, unquestionable certainty, that someone is watching, not hostile, not threatening, studying. The way a scientist looks at something that greatly interests him. In every dream, her attention returns to her wrist, to the mark. And in the dream, she understands what it means, understands clearly, completely, without a shadow of doubt. The way you understand your own name, but every time she wakes up, the understanding disappears. Completely, without a trace, as if it had never existed. She tried recording the dreams immediately after waking, a voice recorder on the bedside table, a pen and notebook in her hand. The meaning flies away faster than she can formulate even a single word. Several fragments remain, which she later showed to researchers. One of them sounds like this: "The mark is not a label. It is not what I thought. It is something like an address. No, coordinates. A way to find. Find whom? Me? Or no, to find back. Back where? I know in the dream. I know. Please let me remember. Please." She did not remember. Another fragment, recorded about a month later. "They are not evil. That is important. I want this to be written down. They are not evil. They are just different. Very different. Time for them is not what it is for us. I was there for a long time, not 7 days. Much longer. But for them it was a second, probably. Much longer than Anjum, 7 days. But for them, a second. Remember the nails. At a standard growth rate, in 7 days, nails grow about 1 millimeter. Mara's had grown by 3, which corresponds to 3 to 4 weeks. This is documented in medical records. From the perspective of our time, she was gone for 7 days. From the perspective of her body, about a month passed. From the perspective of her memory, nothing passed. 3 different answers to the same question: how much time passed? I do not know how to explain this. I am simply recording the facts. Here I must take a step back and tell you something about the Nahanni area itself. Because if you think Mara's case is the first time this place has appeared in such stories, you are mistaken. The Nahanni River Valley among the local peoples, the Dean and the Cree, had different names, but the meaning was the same. A place of power. A place where the boundary between worlds is thinner than usual. The elders spoke about it directly and without metaphors. There is something here, something that does not exist in other places. At the beginning of the 20th century, this place acquired another name, the Valley of Headless Men, because several gold prospectors found the decapitated bodies of their colleagues there. This is a historical fact documented. The killers were never found. There were many versions, from hostile tribes to bears. None was confirmed. But I want to talk not about murders. I want to talk about disappearances. Over the past several decades, dozens of cases of missing people have been recorded in the Nahanni Park area and adjacent territories. Most received rational explanations: hypothermia, accidents, navigation errors. The bodies were found, the circumstances established, but in several cases, the bodies were not found, despite large-scale searches, and in 2 cases, before Mara, people returned. The first, the late 80s, a hunter disappeared in the same region. He was found on the territory of the United States, in the state of Montana, physically healthy, partial memory loss for the period of absence, and a geometric pattern under the skin on the wrist. This man never publicly told what happened to him until the end of his life. He died in the early 2000s. His relatives say that he woke up at night screaming until the very end. The second, the early 2000s, a biologist working in the same area, disappeared for several days, was found in another American state. Physical condition: satisfactory. Memory loss: an identical mark on the wrist. He is alive. He contacted Mara after her story became public. They met once. What they talked about, they do not disclose. Both of them. 3 cases. The same geographical point of disappearance. The same symptoms. The same mark. Officially, these cases were never combined into a single proceeding. Each was considered in isolation. There was no overarching investigation, neither Canadian nor American. Think about that. I understand. You want a rational explanation. I wanted it too. So let's examine each version honestly. Version 1. Dissociative fugue. A person in an altered state of consciousness moves, acts, and subsequently remembers nothing. Cases are documented in medicine. People really have covered significant distances this way. 3,000 kilometers in 7 days, without money, without documents, without traces in the systems of transport hubs, without crossing the Canadian-American border, which nevertheless exists and implies passport control, without a single witness, and without weight loss, and without damage to the soles of the feet, and without insect bites, theoretically possible, practically. It requires such a number of coincidences that it in itself becomes inexplicable. Version 2. A setup. Mara organized everything herself. She went to California, staged the disappearance. Her camp was found by search teams, not by her. The fishermen who found her on the beach had nothing to do with her. The medical data, independent specialists, several hospitals, and most importantly, she did not monetize this story. No book, no show, no blog with millions of followers. A few interviews, given because journalists found her themselves. What is the point of a setup that you get nothing from? Version 3. Abduction. Someone took her from the camp, held her somewhere for 7 days, then transported her to California. The absence of signs of violence. The absence of biological markers of captivity. The absence of weight loss. And most importantly, why? What motive? What kind of kidnapper is this? Who takes a person from the Canadian taiga, keeps her for a week in ideal conditions, leaves a mysterious mark under the skin, and neatly places her on a beach in Santa Monica? If you have an explanation that fits all these facts into a single logical chain, I want to hear it. Seriously. Because the investigators, doctors, and everyone else who worked on this case did not find one. In '74, a small article was published in a little-known anthropological journal. A researcher was recording the oral folklore of the Dean people, the indigenous inhabitants of those places. Among other things, a story about those whom the Dine call the ones who live under time, not evil spirits, not good ones. In the Dean worldview, this distinction does not make sense in relation to these beings. Simply others. Fundamentally different. The elder described them as those for whom time flows differently. Not faster and not slower, simply differently. In such a way that our life looks to them like a single moment and their observation of us, like observing ants, close, patient, almost endless. Sometimes, the elder said, they take someone, watch, study, return. For us, several days pass. For them, a flash. The researcher asked, why do they return them? The elder answered without pause, because they need us to continue to exist. For now. This word, for now, the researcher marked separately in his notes, with a question mark. I will not draw conclusions from this fragment. You will draw them yourself. Officially, the case is closed. The wording, the circumstances of the disappearance could not be established. There are no grounds for continuing the investigation. No violations of the law were identified. No threat to society was established. The file is in the archive. The story is finished. But the mark on Mara's wrist did not disappear. It did not change. It did not fade. It did not dissolve over the years, as happens with ordinary tattoos. It looks exactly the same as on the day it was discovered. An attempt to remove it with a laser led to nothing. A few weeks after the procedure, the pattern restored itself, completely, down to the last line. The dermatologist who observed this process described what was happening as a structure that behaves like living tissue, but is not a type of tissue known to us. The dreams did not stop. They became fewer, but they return, always with the same feeling: presence, observation, interest, not aggression, not threat. Something that Mara tried several times to describe and ultimately settled on one word: attention. Attention is being paid to her, constantly, even when she does not dream anything. She says she feels it in the background, like a quiet sound you get used to and stop noticing, but that does not disappear. Mara lives in Vancouver. She changed her field from ecology to cognitive psychology. She says it is not accidental. In 2021, she returned to the Nahanni area, not for a hike. She simply stood on the riverbank for about an hour, looked at the water. Then she said one phrase to the friend who accompanied her. "She feels that she is still remembered," the friend asked. "What does that mean?" After a long pause, Mara said, "Something like an obligation. She does not yet know what kind, but when the time comes, she thinks she will understand. She is still waiting." I spent several months working on this story. I read documents, studied medical reports, spoke with people who were willing to talk. By nature, I am a skeptic. I look for rational explanations, and I find them more often than not. Here, I did not. But here is what I found in the end. And this is the last thing I want to tell you, because it is what I cannot shake since I read it. I found a list of missing persons in the Nahanni area over the past 20 years, a public, open registry. I went through it and marked the cases where the bodies were never found. There are 7 of them. 7 people disappeared in the same region. The bodies were not found. The circumstances were not established. And then I found something else. A small note in a local newspaper of the province of British Columbia, 2023. A woman, 42 years old, an experienced geologist, went out for fieldwork in an area bordering Nahanni, did not return, was found 9 days later in the state of Oregon, USA, physically healthy, remembers nothing. I could not find information about a mark on her wrist, but I continue to search, because if this is happening again, and apparently it is, only one question arises. Not what it is, not why they do it, but this one. Who are they looking at right now while you and I are occupied with this video? The silence that Mara described that night. Absolute, dead, lifeless silence. She says that she sometimes hears it to this day, in random moments, in random places, without warning. And then she simply freezes and waits, because she knows when such silence comes, something is nearby,